introduce you. So our last presenter is Askey. He's an artist, a curator, and an Anglican priest. He's currently serving as school chaplain at Southwell Minster in Nottinghamshire's cathedral. And his presentation is The Cross and the Zombie Apocalypse, 2 images for our time. Matthew.
In this paper, I'll examine recent artworks by 4 British-based artists, work which help us to explore some current cultural understandings of apocalypse. Each of the artists have in common a drawing together of 2 contrasting and seemingly contradictory ideas, the Christian cross and the zombie apocalypse. And each artist goes some way to linking these 2 themes visually to reveal for us something of our current popular narrative for the end of the world. The story we tell ourselves as a culture and the ideas that we identify with, which I argue is a meeting of the old and of the new. Perhaps it always will be. The development then of the first Christian image and its meanings into the second, which involves zombies, demonstrates to us how the reception of the idea of apocalypse has shifted over the last couple of centuries, steadily moving away from a Christian understanding of an end of life as a positive new beginning, and towards letting into this Christian narrative a very different model for apocalypse, which at the same time retains the framework of the Christian tradition in order to tell a new story. This development of apocalypse, as seen today in popular culture and reflected in fine art, as we'll see in a moment, is a sort of a distortion or a version, an intended corruption even, of what has gone before. Now, the second slide is a photo of the poet and priest Ian Adams, seen here writing a poem in response to Paul Benny's painting, Corpus, which was exhibited at the recent Crossings exhibition that I curated at Southwell Minster, Nottinghamshire's cathedral. And that exhibition was a retelling of the cross and resurrection in new art for today. And indeed the 4 artists that I'll be showing here all exhibited in the Crossings exhibition earlier this year. So the cross of Christ is a deeply embedded cultural idea which continues to run through our contemporary post-Christian culture. For believers, it is a gate opening into the knowledge and presence of God through recognizing God's love for us in his self-sacrifice at our hands. And it invites believers to take part in God's eternal life here on earth. It gives us access to resurrection through the action of the cross, which brings about the eschaton, the end times. Now, I'd like to argue that the phenomenon of the zombie apocalypse is a direct contemporary response to Christian notions of the eschaton, presenting end times which, instead of promising eternal life and final judgment as a positive, longed-for conclusion to human life, an end to the suffering body, and of new life in God, instead has become transformed in the popular imagination into a resurrection without faith. In other words, a bodily resurrection only, a tragic story where once there was a glorious one. St. Paul, in his chapter 8 from Romans, sets out the possible conflict that we each have between the body and the spirit, which Jesus came to unite in himself, and St. Paul wrote this: "For those who live according to the flesh set their minds on the things of the flesh, and those who live according to the Spirit set their minds on the things of the Spirit. To set the mind on the flesh is death, but to set the mind on the Spirit is life and peace. If the Spirit of him who raised Jesus from the dead dwells in you, he who raised Christ from the dead will give life to your mortal bodies also through his Spirit that dwells in you." Now we have here a photo of a zombie flash mob, which is a phenomenon which is increasingly popular. And the zombie then, as a cultural type, unveils for us fears of what an end-of-the-world resurrection might look like in a world without faith. The eschaton is a shared experience, not something that happens just to individuals alone. The zombie apocalypse likewise is presented as a mass breakdown and destruction of society and the world. It sees our shared human future as cynical and hopeless, a fear-filled bodily decay, and it tends to expose to us the possibility of two kinds of mass human annihilation, that's of nuclear holocaust on the one hand, or pandemic plague on the other. And sometimes the zombie story, the zombie myth as it's presented, has both of those elements happening at once. So both of these fears are well grounded in our 20th and 21st century imaginations through recent precedent and several near misses. In relatively recent times, the tragedy of AIDS is another example of a disaster theme which has added impetus to the veracity of the zombie story. Now, we're probably already familiar with the zombie apocalypse narrative, simply because it appears so surprisingly commonly on all sorts of levels, often appealing to our sense of humour, as well as to a kind of a knee-jerk yuck factor reaction. It's transgressing childish humour and silliness with adult horror themes, to the extent that absurdity is usually the overriding message. It's a story which is pervasive and ubiquitous in contemporary culture. It's everywhere. It's in the movies, board games, comic books, novels, TV, children's toys and games, even in the news with zombie flash mobs, you name it. And it's all over the internet. The mass acceptance of this obviously false story tells us that the zombie apocalypse is a narrative which contains truth for us. It chimes on some level with our feelings about the world. The truth of the apocalypse presents functions just like art on a spiritual level. So it works on a spiritual level, on the level of our hopes and our fears, as a story we tell ourselves. It's of note that in direct contrast, and as a direct response to the Christian eschaton, the zombie apocalypse is often humorous, outrageous in its expression, cynical in its conclusion, and hopeless in its aspiration. So the hysterical fakeness of the zombie apocalypse narrative is seemingly at odds with how enthusiastically and seriously it's taken by those who engage with it, almost to the extent as to blur the boundaries of fiction and fact. It is as though the only possible response towards those who have faith in a Christian apocalypse, for some unbelievers, is to react in an exaggerated cartoon-like manner in order to eclipse and pull down the established apocalypse tradition with a new, deliberately absurd commentary upon it. From this perspective, both the Christian apocalypse and the zombie apocalypse would be as equally absurd to the unbeliever. But as we will see, the zombie apocalypse has become so ubiquitous as to become a strong influence upon art which explores Christian themes. So it's become a sort of a fusion or confusion, perhaps, of the apocalypse in art and in the popular imagination. So to offer a little bit of backstory and context visually, I'd like to look very briefly at a small number of images of apocalypse, influenced by the Christian tradition, beginning with those displayed in English churches of the Middle Ages, the Doom paintings, which are a familiar sight to all people in England, who nearly everyone would have gone to church, for several centuries, often being presented over or near the west door of a church, which is the people's entrance to the church. And of course it was upon exiting the church that the painting would be most visible and unavoidable. And the typical scene would show Jesus in judgment over the destruction of the earth at the end of time, with some people going to heaven and some to hell. And demons and devils torment those who end up in hell for all eternity. It's a powerful and memorable image for the people to see upon leaving church. Of course, we've thought a little bit about John Martin already at this conference, and here's his most famous painting, The Day of His Wrath. And this popular image is seen in Western art recurring again and again, the idea of the body suffering. And by the time we reach the 19th century, a figure like John Martin could present us with a more, perhaps, even though it's quite exaggerated, naturalistic and realistic seeming paintings on a vast scale, something that will take in our whole vision when we stand in front of it, something which perhaps touches us with a sense of the sublime. But without Jesus now, only showing the horror element of the apocalypse. So this is something new. The popularity of the dramatic events at Pompeii around this time, which of course was discovered a generation earlier in the 18th century, became fashionable in painting around this time. And here's another famous painting by John Martin of Pompeii. We see similar images from Turner, interestingly, in the more secular context of storms at sea. And each of these 19th century scenes, the human body is seen as being tormented and overwhelmed, just as in the Doom paintings and other Last Judgment tradition paintings. But here they're presented in a new way, without the promise of the hope of a Christian resurrection. So we've got a significant development. Now here we have images of Romero and other zombie movies. When we think of zombies, perhaps we think first of all of films, of movies. But over time, this imagery of the body in pain evolves further, so that by the mid-20th century, these tormented bodies lose all sense of human dignity and become entirely unspiritual creatures. They're destructive and they're painful bodies only. So Romero's Night of the Living Dead, for example, probably the most famous zombie movie, becomes a benchmark for the later 20th century image of the zombie as a mindless, painful body in motion, out to eat all sensible humans it encounters. A kind of a virus on legs, really, an image of a virus, perhaps. So this is the first of our four artists, Nahem Shoa, and each of the four contemporary artists that we'll look at now, Nahem Shoa, Richard Meghan, Siku and myself, were part of this exhibition, the Crossings exhibition. 36 artists in all. And it's presented in two halves, over Lent and Easter, reimagining the cross of Christ and the resurrection of Christ for today. Now here the artist Nahem Shoa presents us with resurrection paintings which draw upon both Christian resurrection images of the empty tomb and joins them with images of nuclear apocalypse. This painting is called Blue Resurrection, and the other one, which we'll see in a moment, is called Mother and Child. And in them we have a fusion of imagery which from the perspective of Christian theology makes perfect sense. The end of the world being a revealing of God to mankind, a positive thing, but it's mixed with images most of us today probably fear the most. That's of the nuclear holocaust. This is the Mother and Child. I asked Nahem what his intentions were for these works, and he gave me a quote. He said this: "When I made these works, I was interested in the fact that no one knows what Jesus looked like, yet there are hundreds of thousands of paintings of him. I thought by combining the scientific idea of creation, Big Bang, and using elements from master paintings, Blue Resurrection, for example, has landscape elements from Raphael, and the tomb is from Tintoretto, that I would get a true portrait of God." So he's trying to reveal to himself and to his viewers what a portrait of God might be. So for Nahem, the moment of creation, the Big Bang, not only synthesizes with a nuclear explosion, but also with revealing the face of God himself through the action of Jesus at the Last Judgment. I've added a little photo here of Piero della Francesca's ubiquitous resurrection painting in order to compare not only compositional elements but colours and forms too, and to link the idea of someone coming out of the grave. This is an image we're going to see in a moment, as you can imagine. Someone coming out of the grave with the apocalypse. Our second artist, Richard Meghan's paintings for Crossings, presented more personal autobiographical images showing his ex-partner suffering from mental illness. That's the image on the right. In the grip of evil and in the grip of death. And the left-hand painting was the one for the resurrection. And this painting shows kind of a new zombie-like person in the sense of the body being rather in a mess, being born out of a cadaver riddled with maggots which lies on the ground. And the background of both paintings is thoroughly apocalyptic, showing massive fires and burning crosses on the horizon. So nice fun images there. Now, I'd like to link visually this sort of cross sense of the vulnerable body being taken in the grip of evil and death with several cultural traditions which have fed directly into a current sense of the zombie narrative, particularly visually. And the European medieval dance of death, of course, curiously quite separately but equally culturally influential counterparts in the New World of the Americas, through the beliefs and rites of many pre-Columbian civilizations. And here you can see a ceramic by the Moche culture of Peru at top right. And perhaps more famously, the Mexican Day of the Dead, which also happens outside Mexico now. It's become quite popular, perhaps alongside the zombie flash mob phenomenon. So the zombie story itself is from Haiti in the Americas and emerged culturally as a story in the 19th century. Now, in recent times, the Dance of Death has had a specifically zombie emphasis, perhaps not surprisingly, with Michael Jackson's 1982 album Thriller, which was massive, of course, and it's had a big influence on culture. And here underneath we've got images of zombie dancing, which is a kind of a niche area of zombie flash mob behaviour. Our third artist, Siku, is a manga artist who works in the Japanese manga tradition, and we find here images of Jesus riffing on the zombie visual types, the shambling, bleeding figure there carrying the cross, the image of their hand in agony. Now, the horror and the death-like hand of Jesus on the cross comes straight from the famous Eisenheim altarpiece by Grunewald. And it's also linked directly with the archetypal zombie image of the grasping hand. In fact, it's an image we saw a moment ago in those Chinese films as well, with the people in hell, which had sort of borrowed that same visual as well. But this time not grasping from pain inflicted against God, but from the zombie looking for human flesh to devour. So Siku's resurrection image quotes this image directly. And as Jesus' hand comes out of the tomb, and in fact it makes a sound which is written out in words, tomb, as it comes up. And this meeting of images links the dead Christ on the cross and the expectant resurrection with the living dead of the zombie myth. And the Christian resurrection has the expectation of paradise, as you can see on the image on the right there, but the zombie resurrection is very different. Now, the apotheosis of this probably is the extreme and perhaps handily clearer expression of the linking of these two images in popular culture that we see in the zombie Jesus figure, which is all over the internet nowadays. And it offers an alternative to Easter, just Zombie Jesus Day. And clearly these examples aren't perhaps high art, but it tells us a lot about the beliefs of some who are engaging with all of this material. And again, you'll notice the cynical humour is an important part of it. And it's an important part of the reception of it as well to make it acceptable. And it's a very direct and deliberate attempt to pull down Christian notions of resurrection and of apocalypse. Now, the final artist is myself. These are works by me. And in my own work, I've fused Christian ideas with modern fears of apocalypse in several ways over the years, and here are two self-portraits, a painting on the left and a drawing on the right, from a series of works that I made while wearing masks of Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un. And here are related self-portrait works wearing a zombie part mask, in which I'm attempting to explore the body-spirit idea that we all struggle with, and which we heard St. Paul writing about earlier. And this works particularly well in art, I think, because the art shows the body, but it functions as art at an entirely spiritual, mental, emotional level, and each are very much dependent on the other, so it kind of brings them together in I'd like to think, quite a prayerful way. It's a spiritual function. And these works are similar, I think, to I see them as similar to the Trump-Kim mask works, in that the fear of mindless power resulting in horror is raised. And they'll inevitably have the effect of increasing anxiety over a real apocalyptic event in our own time. So what's useful about contemporary art in all of this is that it reflects the situation back to us with nuance and with complexity. It doesn't necessarily give us easy answers, but it encourages us to ask lots of questions. So it offers a spiritual conversation of very material fears. Now the next two slides show a self-portrait attempt at exploring Psalm 22, which of course is the sort of the crucifixion psalm in the Christian tradition, which with these toys here that I've used as a site of natural dysfunction, really bringing forward the eschaton. But the toys have something of the absurdity and the cultural irreverence of B-movie apocalypse, whether a zombie apocalypse or a nuclear holocaust. And there's some more images there, crucifixion, where the caterpillar self-portrait then becomes the resurrection as a butterfly, which of course is a symbol, a well-known symbol for resurrection. Now here we have the final couple of slides coming up, and it's again more of the self-portrait series, with me being under the shadow of Trump and under the shadow of Kim with the masks. And finally, Trump mask and a cross. So in conclusion, we might ask the question, why are these two contrasting themes both images for our time? Well, one contains and empowers the other, and the other, the zombie apocalypse, is dependent on and is a direct reaction to the theology of the cross and resurrection, offering us a faithless alternative for those who cannot have faith in God. The cross of Christ precedes the zombie apocalypse but is not displaced by it. Apocalyptic theology is about the action of God independently of how humanity receives the revelation. And while the zombie apocalypse is current in the popular imagination, so also is the cross of Christ, each offering an antidote to the other. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew, and a wonderful way to finish, if I might say. It was really, really wonderful. Matthew, there's a taxi coming for you in 10 minutes?
10 minutes,
thereabouts. Yeah. So we have 5 minutes to ask Matthew questions before he sprints across the garden to the museum over there. And Leela, you two, you're all ready? Okay. Questions for Matthew? Yes.
Did you believe, I mean, you mentioned this, but perhaps you can expand, that the image of the zombie changed from the initial movies about Haiti to The Walking Dead? It seems the zombies went from bad to worse, in the sense that the latest incarnation of the zombies are really completely dehumanized. Well, if you look at the voodoo movies about, so-called voodoo, about Haiti, they still look a little bit like humans, yes, but not in The Walking Dead. So, do you believe this further dehumanization of the zombies has to do with the fear of apocalypse?
Yes, I do. I think the image of the zombie has been appropriated by, there's a kind of a need there, a sociological need to find an image which expresses that, that fear, that apocalyptic fear, particularly in a post-Christian age where the apocalypse can't be seen in positive terms or in beautiful terms. And so it's a horror story. And the zombie was very much adopted and developed to fit that, and to become an archetype for that. Yeah, to become a vehicle for that, really. Yeah.
Matthew, you said that the zombie that first appeared in Haiti. Does it not have African roots before
It does
that?
have African roots, yeah, it does. But the story, in terms of the Western reception of zombie myth, comes from Haiti in the 19th century.
I once travelled across Haiti on horseback and at night heard people singing in voodoo parties. It's a really interesting country. I'd absolutely recommend anybody going to Haiti. Any last questions for Matthew? No? Okay. Matthew, thank you very much. We'll release you.
Thank you.